When I got together with some of my developer friends to create a side project involving an inventory and crafting system, I realized something. While there are many tutorials on creating some types of basic inventories on YouTube and such, there's no full-fledged tutorial on creating a crafting system. So what we will be creating is something similar to this earlier version seen here. My goal in this series is to change the fact that there are no inventory and crafting system tutorials. In fact, there are no crafting tutorials that I know of. So we'll start off by creating an inventory system very similar to many that you may have seen on YouTube, and then we're going to build a crafting system that works directly in sync with it so that everything works together, and it will be as dynamic as possible, if not fully dynamic. I'm going to set it up to be fairly modular so you can adjust it to your needs, but still very powerful. This will be a very in-depth tutorial and may take a long time to follow, but I hope it shows some different ways of using Unreal motion graphics and blueprints to create these systems for beginners. First off, let me introduce myself, Insomnia from Unreal Tech, a division of Blender Tech, and welcome to another video. If you learned something, consider liking the video and subscribing for more videos. And don't forget our motto, create your way. With that said, let's get started. So I'm using Unreal 4.7.6 on the verge of the release of 4.8, but everything should work for many versions to come. I'm going to use the first person template. We don't need any starter content, but you can add some if you like. So just choose a path and a name, and let's create our project. So with our project loaded, I'm just going to do a bit of setup first so that everything is nice and easy to use. So I'm going to go into the first person BP folder. I'm going to go into Blueprints. I'm going to drag out the first person character and move it into the root. That way it'll be easily accessible. We're going to build a lot of the action mapping onto the first person character class to keep things simple. I'm going to create a new folder called Blueprints. I'm going to right click, set color. I'm going to make that pure green so that I know that that's what I'm currently working in. I'm going to go into Blueprints. In fact, I'm going to drag first person character right into there because we should be able to do all of our work in there. So in Blueprints, I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it actor. So that will be for all our actor classes. I'm going to right click. I'm going to set that color to green. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this one, we'll go for, how about HUD? We'll set that color to a new color, to green, so green and red and no blue, because we'll be using that intermittently. I'm going to make a new one called GUI, or just UI, or whatever you prefer. I put all my UI blueprints in a folder like that. And then I'm going to right click and set color to green. I'm going to open up the GUI folder. I'm going to create one folder. It's going to be called crafting. I'm going to set that one to red since that will be what we'll be doing later. So full red. Make another one called inventory. Set that one to green since we need to do that one first. And that should be it for now. We will need another folder later maybe, but that should be it for now. Now, so that our folders do not get deleted, under HUD, I'm going to right click, create a blueprint class. I'm going to go to all classes. I'm going to search HUD, H-U-D, hit HUD. I'm going to hit select, and I'm just going to name this tutorial HUD. And then under the GUI / crafting folder, I'm going to create a new widget by right clicking, user interface, widget blueprint. Now I prefix all my widgets with W underscore. Now whatever naming interface you use is just fine, but that's how I set mine up. So I'm going to call this W underscore craft main, and under the inventory I'm going to do the same thing, right click, user interface, widget blueprint, W underscore inv. I'm going to go for inv main. I like things nice and short. And under actor, just so that it doesn't get deleted on us, I'm just going to create a blueprint class actor, and I'm just going to leave it like that just so it doesn't get deleted yet. I'm going to save everything, Control S, and we are good to go. So let's start off with setting up the actual inventory look. Well, first thing I like to do is turn off the animation panel since we won't be using it. We won't be using it right now, so just go to Windows and uncheck animations. Sorry, close that window using the X, and then this little arrow up here, click on that to get the timeline and X that out. That'll give us a lot more room to work in with the hierarchy. I like to use the hierarchy to drop items in instead of taking one and dropping it right into the designer, the canvas. The first thing, we're in 1280 times 720, so 720p. I like to change the preview size to 1080p since most everyone has a monitor in 1080p these days. We need to set up our layout for our inventory. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go into panel. Most of the stuff we're going to use is in panel and column. I like to start off with size boxes and borders because the size box allows you to change the size of your windows, I guess you could call them, but essentially your widgets at any date if you decide it's too small or too big. So let's start off with just a couple of borders, kind of just lay out our system. So this will be where our list of items will be, and then we'll have a window for when we actually click on one, something like that maybe, and then we'll drag out another one, and this will be its image. Something like that I think will work just fine. We have plenty of room to work with, though. We could probably make this quite a bit bigger. So just kind of drag and play around with the sizes till you get something that you like. It can always be changed later. I think I like the look of something like that. I'm going to change these awful whites to something much darker. Let's try 282828FF. Yes, that's a perfect color. That's what I like to use for my backgrounds. So just keep that color in mind. So brush color 282828FF. And the last one, 282828FF. Perfect. Now, we need to name these. Otherwise, you are going to get lost in both your inventory and your crafting system. So for the border, the first one, the one selected here, I'm going to call this one border list. This one over here, I'm going to call border details. And this one down here, I'm going to call border image. That way everything is, we know exactly what everything is. And it's a lot easier to understand in the hierarchy. And you could even rename your canvas panel to root, whatever is easiest for you. Anyways, so next up we need to add, like I said, I like to use size boxes as my next thing. So add a size box to each border. I won't do anything at first, but if we expand all of these, and we'll start with the list, and we'll choose the size box. Now we want a width override and a height override to be the same size as what we created the list to be. So we go over to size X and size Y, and we created it at about 546 by 882. So just roughly remember those numbers and hit size to content. Then select the size box, and on the width override we were at 5 something, so I'm gonna go 556. And height override, I'm gonna go 796. Maybe 812. Yeah, something like that'll work. I like to just use powers of 2. So since on the border we chose size to content, it doesn't matter what size it is now. It is gonna be the exact size that we set the size box. That's why I like using size boxes, because then we can always change the size later. If we decide later that this is too big, we can always make it smaller and everything will compensate automatically. So I'm going to rename this size box list. We'll go on to the next one. We'll rename that one quick size box details, and we'll find our size again, about 700 by 484. So we'll go width and height override. We'll go say about 656 by, what was the height again? 484. So we'll go 456, and then we'll go and check off size to content. That looks just fine to me. Move on to the image. Size to content, it's, well, it doesn't matter what the size is because I always use 128 by 128 images. It's a good size for this size of display, in my opinion, is 128 by 128. And then what I like to do is create a little arrow button here for making it smaller, down to 32 by 32 or 64 by 64, and animating that. But we won't get into that, maybe in a little bonus episode at the end. Anyways, with that done, we need to start adding content. Call this size box image, just so that we keep our nomenclature nice and even. And that one we can collapse. We really won't be coming back to it. Really, all we need to do is add an image to it. I don't have a brush handy, so we'll just give it the first person crosshair. That's kind of annoying, but that'll just show us that it's an image preview. So anyways, we'll start with the list. So we need to start by working vertically. So everything is going to be shown vertically first. So we're going to add from panel a vertical panel. Vertical, where are you? Horizontal box, vertical box, there we are. And I'm going to drag it directly on top of the size box, since a border can only have one child. And then we'll expand the size box, and then the vertical box, just like this, is fine how it is. Now I'm going to take text. I'm going to drag a text block onto it, expand that out. I'm going to select the text block. I'm going to center it horizontally, and I'm going to set it to inventory. Perfect. Next, we want to add a spacer so that we have a little bit of room between it and the actual list. So we'll go into primitive and choose spacer, and we'll drag it into the vertical box. We'll select the spacer, and X and Y, just like the graphs you made in high school and grade school. Y is height, X is width, so we want Y to be about, say, 10 to 15 pixels. 10 looks fine to me. Next, we need to start working horizontally. So we'll put in a horizontal box. So we'll drag that on top of the vertical box. So the horizontal box will go inside of the vertical box. And at first it might seem very small and insignificant. You could hit fill if you wanted, which we will do. Actually, we'll leave it on auto since it will fill itself. And so the first thing we want to add is a spacer into the horizontal box, and this will give us some space on the left hand side. As you can see, it's very small right now, it's 1 pixel, so let's change the X to 10. Let's go 5, just a little bit of space on the side. So we'll have the spacer, and then we'll want to add another border so that we can differentiate between the two. So we'll add a border to the horizontal box, and then we'll select that border, and we'll set its brush color to another one of my favorites, 080808 or 060606 FF. That's too dark. We'll go with 06060606XFF. It's hard to say. Next, we need to add the actual scroll box that will hold the list of all of the items in our inventory. Now, the reason we choose a scroll box, if you hover over it, is because it's good for presenting 10 to 100 widgets in a list. It gives you scroll bars, and it works out perfectly with this setup. So we'll drag that into our horizontal box. I'm going to select the scroll box, and I'm going to rename it scroll box inventory list so that it really stands out, and we want it to be a variable. After that, we want to add one more spacer for the right hand side. So we'll add a spacer to the horizontal box. We'll make it 5 pixels as well. Make sure it's in the right order, and then we'll take the border, we'll set that to fill. And the horizontal box, I guess it does need to be set to fill. And the scroll box inventory list set to fill. The scroll box inventory list needs to be a child of the border that we created just above it. So just drag it on top, and it'll set it up just like that. Yeah, so everything can be set to fill. Yep, perfect. And we have the spacer on each side to give us a little bit of room to set it apart. And we are good to go there. And if we wanted, we could go into the vertical box, and we could add one last spacer, and we'll give it a height, so Y of about 15. So I like the look of that. Now, the reason that I like to use borders is because that way, at any point, if you decide you wanna create some nice Photoshop background for this, all you have to do is just change the brush to whatever texture you want, and it will replace that with it while keeping the hierarchy intact. So that's why I like using borders wherever possible. It gives you, it's kind of like blueprinting. It allows you to prototype very quickly the look, and then later you can go on and refine it. So moving on to the details list, we can now collapse the border list. We'll go into border details. So again, we're going to start off with a vertical box, not a widget switcher, vertical box, and we'll drag that directly onto the size box. Sorry, we'll choose the vertical box, and do we name this one? So under that one, it works the same way as before. We're going to add a text block into the vertical box and expand. Choose the text block and center it horizontally. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller. I'm going to go for about 20. And this one, you can write whatever you want because it's going to get bound to a function that sets the text. So what I like to do is just type in something like item name goes here, so that I know that that is gonna change. So with that made, then we're gonna go pretty much the same as before. We're gonna add a spacer. So add a spacer into the vertical box, and again in the height, so the Y. I think 10 would be a little bit big, so we'll go about 5. That should be good. And then we're going to add, well, we'll need to start working horizontally now, so we'll add a horizontal box onto the vertical box. So the horizontal box again is in the vertical box, and then we start again with a spacer for the left hand side, which we can set to, we'll set the horizontal box to fill this time so we can see what we're doing. And the spacer, we want it in the X to be about 5, keep things nice and even. Then we want our scroll box, so we'll put our scroll box in the horizontal box. Again, we'll name it so that it's very distinct. We'll call it scroll box item details, or item data, or item preview, whatever stands out for you. And then another spacer into the horizontal box, again width 5, and we'll choose the scroll box and hit fill again. And I'm forgetting a very important thing. You would never see the difference. We forgot our border, so take a border and drag it into the horizontal box. Select the border, move it over 1-2 spots, and then take the scroll box and drag it on top of the border. Then select your border, select fill, and we'll choose our brush color again. So that's 060606FF for the hex code, just like that. So we have a spacer on the right hand side and a spacer on the left hand side, and I believe that is that. And again, we'll just add one to the bottom there. I don't like the look of that, so we'll take a spacer and we'll add that to the vertical box. It'll go to the very bottom. You can always use the arrows to adjust where it is, and under the Y we'll go to about 10 again to leave some nice space at the bottom, make them look a little bit, nice and complementary. We could adjust these heights. That's the great thing about using the size box, and in fact the borders, being that they're sized to content, we can use the arrows to drag them. So I'm going to set the position Y to be the same as position X. 96 pixels looks perfect. And then we'll pick border details here, and we'll set that position Y to 96, not 6, 96, so that's at the same height. Goes 712, and border list 96 is just fine. Border image, we want that one to be 712, and we want it to be down, we'll go 656. That'll work for me. Alright, so that is pretty much that setup. We can throw a few things into this scroll box, the item detail scroll box, since that won't be dynamically generated. Well, it will be technically, but if we can put some things in there, whereas this scroll box is a container for widgets that we'll be adding as children widgets. In the item detail scroll box, let's add some text blocks. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll delete the ones, that we don't need. So we'll select the first one. We'll make them a little bit smaller. We'll go about 16 maybe. No, I'll start with 18. And now, depending on how you want to set up your inventory system, if it's an RPG or survival game, You might want to use a weight system. If it's a shooter game, you might want to use a slot system, in which case this might not be the best choice. You may be better suited to creating this using slots, which if there's enough requests for, I might show you how to do that. We could create a slot based one where each item takes up a certain number of space, just like in Arma, but weight is a lot easier to work off of. That way you can just set how much weight your player can carry, and each item will have a certain amount of weight. So we'll center that. We'll call this one weight. Goes here. You know what, since we're keeping things simple today, this one will just be item details. Will go here and should wrap around so that we get a scroll bar. Then we'll auto wrap text. Now, one important thing I like to do is select your scroll box and hit always show scroll bar so that you get the scroll bars. And I like to set the thickness to a little bit thicker, about 10. I'm going to do the same to the inventory list. The scroll box inventory list, 10 by 10, scroll bar thickness, and always show scroll bar. This gives us a little bit better preview of what it's going to look like. Perfect. Now, the item details we want to be a lot smaller, about 14, 16, 14. And I think I might want a spacer in between those two. So let's throw a spacer right into there, and we will take it. We'll drag this one down below it. You need to do that manually since you don't get arrows in a scroll box. And this spacer will set to a Y of about 5. There we go. And you could always add some sort of nice little image there after if you wanted to separate them. But that's basically how it'll work. So we will populate the inventory with all the items that we pick up, and then when we click on one, it will show us the weight, the name, the details, and a little picture. Just keep things simple and something that you can build off. So in the future, you could add whatever you wanted in here. If you were building, like I said, some sort of RPG, you could add, say, item damage. If it was like a sword, you could say, you know, health, protection, whatever. You could really go on as much as, well, as far as you had room for, really. And then yeah, so that is about that. So let's compile and save that. Let's go into the graph. Actually, sorry, we don't need any of that yet. What we're going to do is we're going to go into the editor and go Window, World Settings, the game mode override. Let's choose first person game mode and then go to selected game mode. Let's choose, you know what, instead of the HUD class that I created, the tutorial HUD, let's just go into the first person BP folder. Let's go to blueprints. Let's just pull the first person HUD out and move it into our HUD folder. So just drag and move there. It'll move out. We'll collapse the first person BP folder. Let's delete our tutorial HUD and let's just stick with the first person HUD. Let's forget the world settings altogether. So let's just open the first person HUD. That way we get the crosshair without having to recreate it. However, we want an event begin play. So hold down P and left click to create an event begin play. I like to line them up nicely. But anyways, drag off that and type create widget. We want to construct a inventory main. The owning player is get owning player controller, or get player controller, whatever you'd like. In this case, get owning player controller works just fine. Take the return value, drag off, and type add to viewport, and that will connect it up automatically for you. So when the game starts, create the inventory widget, add to the screen. So this is just so that we can test out what it looks like. So compile and save. Let's hit play and press F11. I'm gonna get a nice view of what it looks like. I like that size, that looks good. Everything is nice and readable. You can still see the world around you. I like the look out of that. The scroll bars are a nice size. They're not too big. They probably could have been about 15 pixels, but I think that'll be just fine. So yeah, I like that. So we'll get out of here. We'll go back into the HUD. Since we don't want that being created all the time, we will just delete that execution node for now and compile and save. We will, however, go into the blueprints folder and we'll choose first person character, And so all this stuff here, I'm going to select it, comment. I'm just going to call this stock input nodes. We'll go up a little bit, and we need to create a few things. So first, let's create a variable called max use dist. So dist is short for distance. I like to keep things, like I said, nice and short and concise. And I also use camel casing. And we want that to be a float. And we'll give it a tooltip. This is the max distance in centimeters that the player can interact with and pick up items at. So a good value is anywhere between 350 and 800. So I like to start at about 450, and if I find that I can't reach items realistically, then I set it a bit higher. So we'll set that to a 450. We need a couple functions. We won't fill them in yet. We'll just create them as placeholders for now. So one will be add to inv. The other one will be trace item. So add to inventory, sorry, yep. The description will set as the ray traced, aka line traced item we select will be added to the inventory with its details. Into the inventory array, I should make that very clear, and then destroyed. And then trace item, this function uses a line trace to hit an item, and we will use that hit item to set to a variable to be able to interact with it. So we can compile and save that. We can save everything. Now we'll go back to the example map and we'll create a few last minute things. Under actor, we want to right click and blueprints and structure, and we're going to use structures for both crafting and inventory because it allows you to hold a large number of variables that you can use to create logic off of. It also creates a nice container, so everything's contained. They're also easy to work with, they're powerful, they just work out perfect. So I always start my structures or structs with capital S underscore. So we'll go S underscore item data, item details. I like shorter, item data. And so this struct is going to hold everything about every single item in the game. So we'll start off with the obvious one, item name, which will be a string. We'll make another one. Again, if you don't know what a struct is exactly, it'll make more sense in the next videos, but for now, or in the next video, but you can always Google it, of course. The next one we'll set to weight. That will be a float. The next one will be item details. That will be a string, so that'll be like, this is a sword that is very sharp. And the last one will be a texture 2D, and that will be the thumbnail. I don't think I'm leaving anything out. Now the beauty of the structure is you can at any time add new information that you want. So let's say that you went ahead and you created your game and you decided, I'm gonna add a sword. You could add a new variable called sword damage that only swords use, and it would be, you know, a float or an integer or whatever, and only swords would use this, but it would still be available for every single item, and it would be automatically or almost automatically available for use. So that's the great thing about structures, is you can go and add things in and change them at any time. But I'm gonna get rid of that. We'll just start with the basic 4 for now. So with that done, the only thing we need to do is go back into the editor, and the new blueprint we're going to rename to BP for blueprint. That's pretty industry standard, underscore master item. Item master. I like that. That looks better. So how this works, Well, first of all, let's just open it up. Now what we want to do, we can get rid of everything in the event graph. This is going to be just a data only blueprint. We need to add a variable called, I'm going to call it s_item data, so that I know exactly what it is. And this is going to be an s underscore. It's going to be the structure we just created. It's going to be an array of, so this is going to essentially hold every single item, well, all of its details anyway. So compile and save that. We can exit out of it. So the reason we create this master item is, well, if we take item master, you'll see that its parent class is actor. I'll go back to the regular. So you can see the structure is a structure, but if we go to the blueprints, you'll see that every blueprint has a parent class. That's why when you right click and go to create blueprint class, whoops, not level, it asks you for a parent class. And so our item master is the parent class actor, which is basically as low as it gets. It can do pretty much anything. But what we're going to do is for each item in the game, you'll right click and hit create blueprint based on this. And you'll see that it has no variables. However, in the construction script, you can see it has a parent construction script. So, and you see the target is BP item master. So what's happening is this is running anything from BP item master, which I'm not going to put anything into, and you shouldn't. You should create hierarchies for that, which we'll get more into later. I'm going to delete everything here. You'll see we have no variables, but yet if we go to class defaults, we have our structure for item data. And sorry, that should not be, if I just realized I made a mistake. If we go back to BP item master, that should not be an array. Compile and save. So you'll see now under class defaults, we now have item data. So if we go back to the editor, you'll see it created BP item master child, and you'll see its parent class is BP item master C. So it's a child of BP item master, so it will do everything and have every piece of data that item master does. So you'll also notice if you go to the child that we just created, that its parent class is BP item master. So this is how you create almost like a flow chart of items. So for example, this might be, for example, BP weapons. And then off of weapons, you would right click, create blueprint based on this. You would say blueprint weapons swords. And then you'd do it again. And you'd go swords underscore broadsword. So what you can do is you can put in swords every single bit of logic that every single sword will share. And then the broadsword, you maybe just add a mesh, and it will automatically do everything that swords does, which does everything that weapons does, which does everything that the item master does. So if you do this very smartly, you can create items very, very quickly and save yourself a lot of work. And you'll notice the parent class is weapons swords, weapons, item master. So I'm going to delete these, however. For now, we're just going to start with item master. So just blueprint item master. Again, I just wanted to show you kind of how the child class and hierarchy system works. And class defaults under item data, that's where we'll be creating our items. So if we right click, create blueprint based on this, we can say, for example, this is an apple. Its weight is 0.25 kilograms, a tasty red apple. And then if we had a picture, we would choose the picture. So yeah, that is it for now. In the next video, we will go through and we will actually go into our character and we will fill out these functions so that they actually work. We'll create a couple test items, make sure that they get picked up properly, and then we'll set up our inventory to actually get full of items. So this was most of the work for the inventory. The next one should be about the same length, but we'll get a lot more done, and then we'll move on to the crafting from there. So that is it for now. Thanks for watching. from the team here at Unreal Tech, a division of BlenderTech.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. We're on social media on the links on your screen. If you disliked this video for some reason, please tell us why so we can continually improve based on community input. We also take requests, so we'll see you next time. Remember, create your way.